Welcome to our first episode of NextGen Leadership Lab, where we empower young professionals to take charge of their careers and rise to leadership roles. I'm Ildi.
And I'm Ákos. We are both senior managers at big multinational corporations, and today we are excited to share our insights on navigating career growth within such large-scale multinational organizations.
Starting your career in a large corporation can be both exciting and daunting. One of the first things to focus on is identifying opportunities for growth right from the start. How do you approach this early in your career, Ákos?
For me, it was kind of special because I started my career in management consulting, and management consulting has this very special careers, which we used to call like up or out, which basically the whole organization is set up for pushing you through the career ladder and pushing you up, or if you are not good enough, then out. So basically you have the pressure, the tension in the system to basically elevate you upwards. It was never really a consideration for me then how to grow, because the whole organization were pushing me upwards in a way. So from my perspective, it was kind of there from the beginning, but I'm not so sure if you are starting in a classic industry organization, whether that would be the same. How did you feel it yourself at the beginning of your career?
I can really much relate to what you just said, because I think it's also the mindset element. One thing from my side that I found very useful is taking elements from your line manager's role. What I mean by that is like start taking responsibilities which is higher than your normal role. See what are the things that are on the plate of your manager, what are the things that you can support and help, and then basically, you do two things there. A, you support your line manager, which means they're going to have less work to do, which is going to be highly appreciated. And the other thing that you also do is like you increase your own visibility and the trust in yourself by other people to understand that you are capable of bringing in new things and taking more responsibility overall. So I would definitely encourage people to do that and kind of like see what else you can manage other than your normal, regular role responsibilities.
Can I go a bit more extreme on that one? Because my experience is you are never going to grow, or at least not fast enough, if you are only doing your job. For me, what helped my career, at least what I could feel, that I was always doing things which were not in my job description. That you can hear many times from people as an excuse, this is not in my job description. And that's the worst thing you can say to senior leaders and to managers. That's not really the way upwards. Yeah. What I felt was always important. Obviously, you still need to do your normal job well. That's kind of expected. But if you really want to grow and if you want to get promoted, always you need to go the extra mile. And as such, the examples you were saying, like trying to take bits and pieces of what your line manager is doing, is really a good way of doing it. But of course, you can do it in two different ways. Either you can kind of do it horizontally, or you can do it a little bit vertically. So horizontally meaning try to expand your parameter of understanding the business. This is anyway needed for leaders. So it's very rare that you can climb very high without having a broader understanding what's going on at the company. And therefore, I would encourage everyone to try to check things during your career. Obviously, again, I'm coming from the consulting example perspective, because there, that was kind of the day-to-day thing. Every 6 months or every 1 year, or even sometimes even more frequently, it was a completely different industry. It was a completely different type of project that we worked on, which obviously helped to get a broad and holistic view around how companies work. But on the other hand, and that comes to our second way of things, kind of the vertical way of trying to explore things more, the expert view. My problem has always been, at least at the beginning of my career, that I always felt that I'm not an expert of anything, and it felt bad. And then later I realized that that's actually my strength, and I don't need to be an expert of things. And if you want to be a leader, then particularly you need rather the holistic understanding. We could say to the ability to zoom out to be able to lead. Nonetheless, at the beginning of your career, when taking on these extra duties, you can take both directions, either to deep dive a little bit within a certain area or try to go outside of your comfort zone.
I think what you just mentioned there is so important in terms of you don't need to be the expert in everything, especially in like leadership roles. I think that is where people find it the most difficult to kind of letting it go that you are the most expert person in the area. Of course, it's like scary and daunting because you need to trust somebody else, either within your team or somewhere in the organization, who can then pick those things up. So what you're saying is that you also need to focus on lateral moves, I suppose, not just focus upwards, but also to get that general understanding and overview of the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes your career is not always just kind of a straight line upwards, right? So you have to make compromises, yeah, when it's not always a way up. There might be steps sideways. Sometimes it can be a situation that you go to a lower ranking role so that it enables you to grow higher. I think I had kind of all of these examples throughout my career. And then looking backwards at that time, this decision might have been seen as probably not necessarily the right steps, just a compromise. But later on looking back, I'm just thinking that was the right sequence and the right things that could happen, but obviously you don't necessarily see it at first. But of course, there are no real bad directions. Maybe you just have a different route.
I agree. I completely agree. And what do you think about global projects? Because I think one of the things that you're doing really well, Akash, is working on large scale global projects, which is not relevant only for you and your role, but as a whole organization and the benefit and the value for the company. What do you suggest people to do if they have opportunities to participate in these large scale global projects?
I think that's super important. And then to be honest with you, one of my reasons why I changed the company I work for, because that was focusing too much on local projects and I wanted to do global projects. Obviously, there are multiple reasons for that. Yeah. So on one hand, the scale of it is much bigger. So you can learn much more and you can get experiences which are really valuable on a global market. So that's one thing. Those projects are probably much more complex, much more interesting, much more exciting, and so on. Second, you then learn also how to work with people from all over the world. So it's not that easy, and sometimes takes a while to understand how different cultures think, how they work, because these are also very, very different. So we are also, you and I are working with multiple teams on multiple continents. And then I think it took a while also for us to kind of understand how to work with the different nationalities. And they are all bringing their different colors and different ways of thinking into a project, which brings us all forward. And of course, the third element is that if you are working on a global project, then later on in your CV, that helps a lot. Yeah, because if you want to have a global career, then especially if you were in a smaller country, like originally yourself, myself, if you want to go on a global job market, if they are seeing companies which are in a small country or maybe not even that much well-known companies, you won't be seen as valuable, regardless of what is your real knowledge in the background. Yeah. But if you can show that you worked on global projects with multiple countries in companies which are recognized worldwide, then this is going to be really a value-adding addition to your CV.
Absolutely. And if I think about also the experiences that you gain within those projects, right? Because I think one important aspect is that, first of all, it gives you like a greater purpose. It's like much wider and broader than your own role itself. So you understand the implications within the organization much better. And then because of the project, obviously, depending on what kind of project we are talking about, but you will have additional finance experience, additional HR experience, additional IT, business related topics, because in these large scale projects, there is always those elements that you need to manage the change with the people. You need to have a budget and you need to have the finances working for the overall project. You most probably will have IT people to implement tools and systems across, etc. And understanding how these organizations are operating and what they're doing gives you that much larger experience.
But then let me ask this question, because Now you talk about projects, yeah?
Mm.
But again, that's a very special, unique way of operating. A majority of the people working at companies are not working in a project environment, although obviously it's growing by the day, by the year, because everything is so quickly changing, everything is kind of triggering some kind of a project. But still, a lot of people are not necessarily working in a project department as such. So how do you see the growth opportunities for those who are working more kind of in the traditional way, having a fixed responsibility of a certain area? How do you see how they can grow? Or would you recommend for them to get out of that environment to be able to grow, or it's not necessarily important?
I think you can grow in literally every kind of a role. So I wouldn't say that grow is only possible in like project roles. What I would say is there are multiple aspects, right? You are building basically a personal brand with your work, which means the delivery of your job description or the role itself that you need to do, that is one aspect. However, there might be additional things that you can volunteer within the organization in addition. And I think you also mentioned that earlier, that is a must. So nowadays, if you want to progress in your career, delivering your job only is not enough. You need to volunteer for different causes. You need to advocate for different areas, what you really feel passionate about, and consider yourself really as a brand. Think about yourself. Who are you? What do you want to sell? What do you want people to see about yourself? And bring that in, even if that is in addition or different to what your day-to-day job and activity is. And when you focus on your brand, I want you to focus on what is the future role or the future direction that you want to go, because then you can build up that momentum, you can build up the conversation. If it's on an IT side, you can start talking about IT tools. If it's on the HR side, you can think about, trends in the human resources industry and so on, right? So there are multiple aspects, but think yourself really as a brand, as a marketing engine that you can bring along.
And I think there are a couple of super important points there, which I think needs to be highlighted, because those are not very obvious as far as I can see the teams I have worked with in the past years. So you're talking about selling, which means proactively doing something. And in many cases, people are expecting that career happens automatically. And yeah, talking about the consulting space, you could argue that what I mentioned at the beginning was kind of suggesting that, but it's not really the case, yeah, because also they're up or out, yeah. So if you were not doing the selling part, the proactive part, you were out. And then also in normal companies, industrial companies, also, I think this proactivity of yourself managing your career is super critical. Your line managers, your leaders, your colleagues, your broader network can support. But if you are not clear about where you want to get to, what do you want to do, how do you want to get there, it's not going to happen, even with the most supportive environment around you. So you are the forger of your own career and your own success. And it's super important for people to understand. It will not happen automatically. There might be companies where it happens automatically, or after 10 or 20 or 30 years, or by pure luck. Yes, it can happen. But I just wouldn't rely on pure luck. I would obviously try to proactively manage it. And from the very early stages of your career, you don't need to be already kind of close to a leadership role or in a higher leadership role. And in a higher leadership role, it's always mandatory. You cannot survive without continuously managing your networks, your stakeholders, your kind of career path for the future, because roles are coming and going, departments are changing, and so on. But even at the beginning of your career, you need to be very clear what you want to do and how, and then you can get support. And I think this is super important to emphasize.
One thing I would probably say is for everyone to have a coach and a mentor as well. I think that would be one of the first things that you should have. Find a coach who can support you in your career journey, right? The coach can ask really good questions in terms of what keeps you going, what keeps you motivated, what do you see yourself doing, what is that driver that you have, and help you to kind of get to that direction. But I would also say that if you have a specific area that you want to focus on, whatever that is, find a good expert, a good leader in that area that you can ask mentorship from that person to support you along the way and kind of like teach you some of the good tips and tricks of the area. What is your suggestion?
Oh, I like it very much. I never really had one properly, but it would have been invaluable, really. And don't be afraid to ask. Yeah. So I don't think anybody would be pissed off if you are approaching them to, can you be my mentor, and take some time, a couple of times per month, to talk about career. Because sometimes even you might not be clear what you want, but the person who is an experienced, a bit more experienced leader can at least direct you with the right questions of trying to see where you should go, and then also then enabling you a little bit more to what the next steps should be, how to get there. I think the other points which are very, very important is to show what you are capable of, because visibility and sharing high quality work is important. Obviously, many times it is pure luck. I was always thinking that, have I been always lucky by kind of catching the attention of the respective senior leaders? Yes, in a way it's luck, but if you are really performing on high quality level with attention to detail, also with the ability to comprehend and understand things, proactively helping your leader to enable things, that's going to automatically bring this. So the person will automatically drag you. I was always wondering when I have been doing recently kind of the performance ratings of my teams. And then I was always trying to be very, very objective that, was I just simply picking this person and then the person was lucky to work with me on a certain project, therefore I consider that person a top talent or a top performer and so on. But then I realized that somehow that person managed to catch my attention and proven himself or herself in the situations. And then afterwards, it's going to be an obvious choice that this person was doing things very well. So obviously, next time I will also think about them to bring them on another project, and then later on consider them for promotion. Unfortunately, sometimes these things are not always 100% objective. And unfortunately, we need to deal with that. We like to say that the performance ranking and rating is based on objective factors. Ideally, yes. Reality, it's not the case. In many times, it's about perceptions. And the perceptions are very important. You need to all handle this perception and try to make sure that the people who are making the decisions about your future, about your career, are having the right perception about yourself. It doesn't mean that there shouldn't be performance behind the perception, but in many cases, what I see is happening that there is good performance, but there is no perception. And then obviously it's a more difficult situation to go further up on the ladder.
And I think that is like linking very well to this like personal branding and selling yourself. I think a lot of people are underestimating the power of that. And I've been there as well, to be honest, where I always focus is just like, let's just deliver the work. I'm not gonna, brag about it or kind of like overshare it. I just like gonna get the work done and then I jump to the next work and I get that done as well. But unfortunately, today's world, you need to do that, right? And that is something, probably an additional advice that we can give is like carve out some time for yourself for communication, for engagement, for personal branding, and talk about the things that you're working on. Obviously, you don't need to overdo it and you don't need to, spend on communications, half of your day, but carve out a couple of hours a week, right? And think about how can you share what you're doing and the achievements that you've done with others so they know as well. I think it's crucial. And as you just mentioned, if you already have someone who you've seen proven themselves to you in a project, in a situation, in any case, you're more likely tend to work with that person. So probably that will be a key element to it. One question I would also want to ask, because we are also talking about personal brand and kind of like marketing and selling yourself. However, how does that align with authenticity, for example, and just kind of how do you create that personal brand of yourself, but also making sure that you are authentic to your own self and you're not selling something that is actually not true?
To be authentic, you need to have a proper understanding of yourself, understanding of your strength, understanding of your weaknesses, understanding your areas of development. That's another general mistake I've been seeing throughout my career, that people think they arrived while we never do. Yeah. So we always have to think about what we are not doing as good as we could. But sometimes, even if we do everything as well as we can, the world is changing. So automatically the standards and what we are measured against is the environment is changing. So no matter what, you just cannot arrive. You are continuously on the journey, and you will always need to be very conscious of what are the development points that you need to address. So I think that's another exercise I will recommend for everyone. And the first point we talked about, try to figure out where you want to get to. And then if you are a bit clear around what direction you want to take, then afterwards you need to think about, okay, what are my strengths in that area? What are the points that are my weaknesses and opportunities? You can do even a SWOT analysis if you like, yeah. And then with a mentor or a coach, you can even be able to identify some of those, because sometimes we are not very good at seeing ourselves with an external eye. Obviously, everybody is evaluating himself or herself much higher sometimes than what the reality is. So it is always good to get an external feedback around those strengths, and then also on the weaknesses and development opportunities. And then build up a plan for yourself. And these things can be hard skills as well sometimes. But I think if we are talking about direction to leadership, the soft skills are even more important, if not more important than that. And hard skills are sometimes easier to kind of learn on a shorter period of time. Soft skills are not necessarily. And sometimes you just can't learn them. You need to experience them, or you need to very consciously push yourself into a different way of behaving or talking or communicating and so on, which is not, you cannot really learn it from a book. You can learn it on the way. So those are a bit more complicated, I guess, but very important that we have very clear view about those bits. And again, as you go higher, these communication things, diplomacy, networking, holistic view, sales and communication, whatever, these soft topics are getting more and more important.
I completely agree. And though you said you cannot learn from a book, I have a couple of book recommendations on the topic, because there are two books that that actually talk about that. One is Act Like a Leader, Think Like a Leader. And then the other book is Atomic Habits. Both of the books have an area where it talks about acting on something before becoming. And especially now on these soft skills that you mentioned, that requires practice, and you need to constantly do it in order for you to have that as a natural skill set. Have those things and practice as much as possible, because the more you do, the more natural it becomes. And then it's not going to be an effort, but in the beginning, for sure, that's an additional effort that you need to put in. And with that, actually, one thought, because we also can talk a little bit about how comfortable are we to practice and to potentially, and not just potentially, fail. Because in a corporate environment, for some reason, people always think about they need to be 100% all the time. And in many of the cases, we share and promote that it's okay to fail, because that, with the right mindset, you are learning quite a lot from it. But still, I think a lot of people are afraid to fail and they want to bring 100% all the time, which is great. But unfortunately, within the learning curve, you will fail from time to time. And if you think about it, for the rest of your life, you are okay with failing. Let me just tell a couple of examples. If you want to, cook a very difficult recipe, you do not expect it to turn it out perfect on the first time, right? You expect you're going to mess it up, right? Or let's say you want to run a marathon. Without running, you're not going to be able to run a marathon, and you know that. You don't expect that I'm just start running and I'm going to run a marathon. And you're okay to kind of fail, and you're okay to get there to that marathon or that perfect cooked meal that you want to do. But in the work environment, we are sometimes not okay with that. And that is something where we also need to think about, that it's okay to have a failed, I don't know, presentation. That's fine. Next time it's going to be better. It's okay to, have a project that did not deliver that much value that you wanted in the beginning. That's fine. You're going to learn from that. But allow yourself also to fail. If you have the right mindset and you bring those learnings in the long run, that's definitely going to help.
Can I be a bit of a devil's advocate here?
Tell
So
me.
obviously there are certain things when you can't fail. So if you are going to do your first heart surgery, obviously the expectation is that it's done well. Yeah. Also, obviously, if you are a broker or whatever dealing on the stock market, and then if you are losing millions of euros, that's probably also not okay. Yeah. Well, it depends. If next time you are winning back double, then it's maybe fine. But there could be situations where it's very difficult to communicate that it's fine. But I think it's not the majority of the situations. However, we all, as you were saying, we are all thinking about each and every situation as if it was a heart surgery. And probably it's not. But of course, for this to work, as you were saying, we definitely need to take the right learnings from that failure and then make sure we don't do it again. That's super important. But we also need a second leadership and the company culture, which is allowing it. Because it's a typical mistake that if you don't have the right mindset, line manager or leadership, they will put you in a box and you stay there forever because of one mistake. And then regardless of what you do afterwards, you will never really get back there again. But I guess nowadays it's starting to become okay because we are all humans. This is human nature. The external factors that could be around and so on and so on. So failure is inevitable in certain cases. And again, what helped humanity to develop is to fail and then take the learnings from it, to not do it again. And I think to be as a norm also in corporate environments. And again, not everything is a heart surgery.
One of my personal experience on this topic was I had a manager earlier in my career with whom it was very hard to fail, to be honest. And exactly as you mentioned, that I always felt that they would put me in a box that I'm a failure, and then I would not be able to get out of that. And what that resulted in me actually is being way too afraid to try, which meant that every single time when I had the opportunity to shine, I'd rather kind of like step backwards, and I would rather wanted to stay in the shadows because then I cannot mess up. But in result, what that ended up with is me not being visible at all. Right. And then I wasn't any, important anymore. I wasn't the expert of the area anymore. It's like, unproductive, unhealthy kind of like stage. In these cases, I would suggest like people to ask like, okay, what's the worst case scenario that could happen, really? Because in the end of the day, is it better to try and then probably fail maybe in the first couple of times, or is it better if you just be in the background and nobody would even know what you are working on and what you do, right? Sometimes those risks are required, and that is something that we can take a step forward in and then try, even if with the risk of failing in the first couple of times.
But is it a sustainable business model for companies to kind of put people into such a mental state that they are not experimenting and they are not trying? I don't think so. So then right place, yeah. So it's counter intensifying the people to do new things, and that's the only way of growing, yeah, trying new things. Did you know from the beginning of your career what you wanted to be and where you wanted to get to it, or it was continuously changing?
I would definitely say that I did not know what I wanted to do. probably in the early stage of my career, it was more around going with the flow, right? Wherever there was a new opportunity, I was in, I wanted to learn new things and try out myself in different areas. But I never had like a very dedicated plan in terms of, okay, in 5 years, I want to be in this role, in 10 years, I want to do that, and so on. I was rather kind of like going with the flow. And I have to say, it's only I don't know, recent probably 5 years where I'm like a little bit more exact in terms of what I want to become and then what do I actively do to pursue that career journey that I want to go through. But for each of my roles that I had, I think there was plenty of learnings on each, and there are so many different areas because I've learned quite a lot from my managers, even the good managers, but also the not so good managers. I think probably you can learn more from the not so good managers than the good managers in the long run. So that was always an experience in terms of how I would want to, manage my own teams going forward and what do I appreciate and what are the things that I think I would do differently. But also in the roles, because I've had roles in many different areas. I've worked in finance, I worked in strategy, I worked in projects, I worked in HR, I worked in comms. So there is a wide range of things that I've been involved. And I think that really helped me to give that overall understanding of how an organization is operating. How does these different bits and pieces come together to this big, massive engine? And like I said, I think over the last, I don't know, probably 5, 6 years when I'm doing more like deliberate actions to those roles that I really, really wanted to do. And it was very interesting because in the beginning, I was not able to pinpoint a particular job that I wanted to do. I was rather knowing the environment I wanted to work in, right? So I always knew that I want to work in, very supportive, very positive environment where people want to work with one another, not against each other. I also wanted to have an environment where I can work on innovation, new technologies, exciting new stuff, and also working with people, right? So I always knew that I don't want to be an individual contributor. I want to have a team. I want to empower the people. I want to give them like career opportunities and so on. And those three things would not pinpoint you in a particular one position, however, would put you in a direction. So sometimes if you don't know which role you would actually want to get to, think about what are those different elements that you love in a role, what are the things that keeps you motivated that you like, because then you can kind of like shorten the list of positions that you can get into. How about you? How did you manage through your career journey?
I could actually simplify it down into three major buckets in a way. The time that I spent in consulting at the beginning of my career, that taught me what work is and how to work, and then gave me a work ethic, which I have been using ever since. And the work ethic was around, you can do anything, you can do everything, you can be thrown into any topics, you have to be a firefighter, you need to be a resolver, you need to be a proactive thinker. So that kind of work ethic I have been still using ever since, and I cannot be more thankful than learning this way of learning. And that was my biggest learning from consulting at the beginning. And of course, the opportunity of, with an early career, you are still seeing into leadership things. Management consulting means you are advising management. Yeah, so you are seeing things that otherwise you probably would see only years later on your career ladder. So that's kind of the first bucket. Then afterwards, I moved over to an insurance company, shared services global environment, because my consulting environment wasn't global. That was very local. This was the first time when I learned how is it to work globally, to work every day, not using my native language, but basically English for everyday communication, working with people from countries I could only see in the map and I was only dreaming to ever go to. Yeah. And that section was teaching me how to work in a global environment, but also kind of having the first insights into what if you are working for one particular company, which has one particular profile and industry. And then also within that, you have an area what you are involved in, finance or technology or whatever. While again, in consulting, it could be anything, really anything. And then the last section is my current company and the current setup I am in, which taught me how to become a senior leader. And then also, interestingly, by now, I also don't feel anymore that I'm not an expert of anything, which really haunted me for years. Now I feel that, yes, there are areas where I can say that I'm an expert of it. So that's for me kind of the three major sections of my career and journey. But I also didn't really know what I wanted to be. Never really knew. So yeah, at the age of 13, I wanted to be prime minister. Then later on, I realized that no, I don't want that. And then I only became an economist because, yeah, if you don't know that you want to be a doctor or you don't know that you want to be a firefighter, then you end up being an economist, yeah. And then still, obviously, afterwards, it's very important to find those things which excites you, because with this, being an economist, you can be literally anything. And later on, also, ever since, if you would ask me how I see myself in 5 years, the usual questions that being asked on a job interview, in 2024, asking the question, what's going to be in 5 years' time? Who would know? I mean, maybe our jobs won't exist anymore, or God knows. So I would also go with the flow even still now, of course, trying to manage it a bit more consciously, but you always need to be adaptable.
And that links really well to what you said earlier as well, right? In terms of you never arrive there. There is no, like, you never arrive to that destination. You're always in the learning, in the making, because things, especially now, as you said, there are so much change going on in the world, so much new technology coming in that you always have new things in your way. So yeah, we always need to keep learning. We never arrive in the destination, but we enjoy the journey. I suppose that is what we need to bring in for everyone.
I guess no better closing words than this.
Very good. And if there are any more topics that you would want us to talk about going forward, let us know. We will definitely bring those in and share our thoughts about it. So thank you so much for listening in and tuning in to the Next Generation Leadership Lab. And we're going to talk with you very soon.
Thank you.